الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تبارك وتعالى لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد كلما ذكره الذاكرون وصل على سيدنا مولانا محمد كلما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون اللهم صل وسلم على عبدك ورسولك اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد أفضل صلواتك رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. In the 10th year of the prophethood of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he suffered some losses that were very personal to him and that left a deep wound in the heart of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the 10th year, when our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 50 years old, he lost his beloved wife, al-Mu'mineen Sayyida Khadija radiyallahu anha. He lost his beloved uncle Abu Talib, the father of Ali, the father of Ja'far radiyallahu anhuma. So that year was very, very painful for our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he named it Amul Huzn, the year of grief and the year of sadness, the year of sorrow. So after the Prophet ﷺ lost the most important pillar of his life, who was supporting him in all of Makkah, his beloved uncle Abu Talib, the Prophet ﷺ didn't really have any strong person in Makkah who could protect him, who could support him, and who could defend him, of course, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ had been preaching in Makkah for 10 long years, an entire decade. And an entire decade of struggle produced only a small result in the form of a handful of people embracing Islam, like Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, Uthman radiyallahu anhu, Umar radiyallahu anhu, Hamza radiyallahu anhu, and others. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam started looking for another place where he could safely promote Islam and preach Islam, because the environment of Makkah was very hostile towards the Prophet ﷺ. So he started looking for another place where he could safely practice Islam and preach Islam. So finally, he narrowed his options down to one city, a nearby major city in the region of Hijaz, which was called Ta'if. The climate of Ta'if is much different than the climate of Makkah. Even though there are mountains in Makkah, but the mountains in Ta'if are more green. The land of Ta'if is more fertile, and there's more farms, orchards, palm trees, grapes, and all of that. So the Prophet ﷺ decided to make a visit to the city of Taif. in order to convey to them the message of Islam. That was the only purpose of the Prophet ﷺ. It was not tourism, it was not business, it was only to deliver the message of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ went to Taif. He was accompanied by only one person, and that person was Zayd bin Haritha radiyallahu anhu, the beloved companion of the Prophet ﷺ, among the most beloved people of all to the Prophet ﷺ. As a matter of fact, he was the adopted son of Rasulullah ﷺ, and people used to call him Zayd bin Muhammad, Zayd the son of the Prophet ﷺ, until Allah prohibited that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed the believers to call people by the names of their actual biological parents. Ud'uhum li'aba'ihim huwa aqsatu 'inda Allah. So then people started calling him Zayd bin Haritha. So Zayd bin Haritha was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they went on foot all the way from Makkah to Taif. It's more than 50 miles of distance. And it's not a plain road between Makkah and Medina. There are mountains. There's very difficult terrain between the mountains of Makkah and the mountains of Taif. So the Prophet ﷺ and Zayd bin Haritha walked from Makkah to Taif for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they reached Taif, they approached three people who were all brothers, and they were the tribal leaders of the main tribe in Taif called Banu Thaqif. These three people, their name was Abd Yalay, Mas'ud, and Habib. So the Prophet ﷺ approached them. He explained to them about Allah. He explained to them about Islam. So all three of them, in different ways, mocked the Prophet ﷺ, ridiculed the Prophet ﷺ, and refused to listen to anything that the Prophet ﷺ had to say. Whatever he said, they said, "Why did Allah select you?" One of them said, "Did Allah really open the curtain of the Kaaba and gave you the prophethood?" In a mocking way. Another one said, "Out of all people in Makkah and Medina, they were very honorable people. They were people with a lot of wealth. They were people with a lot of status. Out of all those people, Allah chose you to be His prophet?" Subhanallah. They mocked the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was heartbroken, but he did not give up. He went to other people. There were two other famous people in Taif. One's name was Utbah, and the other one's name was Shaybah. The Prophet ﷺ went to them. He talked to them about Islam. They both rejected and refused to listen to the Prophet ﷺ as well. And they both expelled the Prophet ﷺ and Zayd ibn Haritha from their territory. And when the Prophet ﷺ and Zayd ibn Haritha were leaving, in order to go back to Makkah, they literally sent a mob of young boys behind the Prophet ﷺ and instructed them to throw stones at the Prophet ﷺ. And this mob did exactly do that. They said insultful things to the Prophet ﷺ, and they threw rocks and stones at the Prophet ﷺ. Zayd ibn Haritha tried to shelter the Prophet ﷺ as much as he could. And he tried to take as many stones on his body as he could. But still, some stones hit the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ bled so much that his shoes His sandals were filled with blood, soaking with blood. His beloved, his blessed blood. Zayd ibn Haritha got injured. He bled a lot. Even his head was wounded. In that condition, in that state of oppression, the Prophet ﷺ and Zayd ibn Haritha, they took refuge in a vineyard, in a grapevine. They decided to take some rest over there, and that vineyard belonged to the same two people, Utbah and Shayba, who had not too long ago insulted the Prophet ﷺ themselves. But when they looked at the condition of the Prophet ﷺ and Zayd ibn Haritha, they felt empathy. They felt sorry for the Prophet ﷺ. So they allowed the Prophet ﷺ to take refuge and rest in his farm, in their farm. And they told their servant, whose name was Addas, to offer some grapes to the Prophet ﷺ. So Addas brought some grapes in a plate and offered it to the Prophet ﷺ and insisted that you have to take some from this. So the Prophet ﷺ, he accepted it and he started eating those grapes. When he put the first grapes in his mouth, he said, Bismillah. In the name of Allah. By the name of Allah. So Addas, when he heard these words, he was shocked. And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, nobody ever says this in this entire region. Where did you learn this from? Because in my place where I come from, people do say this, Bismillah. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him, where do you come from? Addas, he said, I belong to Nineveh, the city in Iraq. So the Prophet ﷺ immediately said, oh, you come from the city of the pious man, Yunus, the son of Matta, Jonah, the son of Matthew. He said, how do you know about Yunus? The Prophet ﷺ said, Yunus is my brother. He was a prophet of Allah, and I am also a prophet of Allah. And I invite you to embrace Islam. Addas was so impressed by the Prophet ﷺ that he embraced Islam. He said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then, when the Prophet ﷺ was leaving, Addas offered more grapes to the Prophet ﷺ so he could use those while he's traveling back to Makkah. When the Prophet ﷺ reached the place called Qarnul Manazil or Qarnul Tha'alib, this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the angel Jibreel alayhi salam to offer his service to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was badly hurt, badly wounded, who did he turn to? He turned to Allah. Who did he call in distress? He called Allah. If we find ourselves in distress, what are we told to do? Huh? No, we're told to call 911. Right? Isn't that what we're told to do? When you are in distress, call 911. My brothers, when you are in distress, call Allah. Supplicate to Allah. Raise your hands and ask Allah for help before you ask a police officer or a firefighter for help. Ask Allah for help. So the Prophet ﷺ turned to Allah and he asked Allah for help. Imagine the kind of condition that the Prophet ﷺ was in. He was totally abandoned. He was totally deserted. He was oppressed. He was all alone. He was helpless. He was weak. There was nothing around him. There was no one around him who could come to his assistance, who could come to his aid. So he turned to Allah for help. And he made this powerful dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, Allahumma ilayka ashku da'fa quwwati. O Allah, to you alone I lodge the complaint of my weakness. I am very weak. And I only rest this with you because you're the only one who's strong and you're the only one who can help. وَقِلَّةَ حِيلَتِي. And I also rest with you the case of my lack of strategy, lack of planning. I am helpless, O Allah, وَهَوَانِي عَلَى النَّاسِ, and my humiliation from the people. These people have humiliated me. And literally, these people had humiliated the Prophet ﷺ, who had come to them for nothing other than delivering the message of Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, O the most merciful of those who show mercy. Anta Rabbul Mustad'afin, you are the Lord of those who are suppressed. Ila man takiluni, who are you abandoning me to? O Allah, ila aduwwin ba'idin yatajahamuni, to an enemy who is about to attack me and destroy me? Am ila sadiqin qareebin malaktahu amri, or are you abandoning me to a close friend? O Allah, you have complete control over all of my affairs. إِن لَمْ تَكُنْ غَضْبَانًا عَلَيَّ فَلَا أُبَالِي. O Allah, if you are not angry with me, then I don't care about all this humiliation, about all this weakness, about all this pain, about all this suffering. I do not care as long as I know that you are not angry with me. غَيْرَ أَنَّ عَافِيَتَكَ أَوْسَعُ لِي. But your protection and your blessing is greater for me and better for me. أَعُوذُ بِنُورِ وَجْهِكَ. O Allah, I seek refuge from the light of your face. الَّذِي أَشْرَقَتْ لَهُ الظُّلُمَاتِ, the light that has enlightened the whole world in all its darkness. وَصَلُحَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْرُ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ, and all the matters of this world and the next world are fixed by that light. مَنْ تَنْزِلُ بِي غَضَبَكَ أَوْ يَحِلُّ بِي سَخَطَكَ وَلَكَ الْعُتْبَى حَتَّى تَرْضَى وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِكَ. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from allowing your anger to descend on me or your wrath to descend upon me. And all the matter is in your hand. And all the praise is for you, O Allah, until you become pleased. And there is no power and there is no strength except from you. Now, the Prophet ﷺ was hurt, was wounded, was oppressed, was wronged. He was traveling. Everything that you can imagine that makes your dua acceptable to Allah, the Prophet ﷺ was in that condition. One of the people whose dua is accepted is a traveler. Another person whose dua is accepted is madhloom, someone who's being wronged and oppressed. Their duas do not get rejected. The Prophet ﷺ was a traveler. He was oppressed. He was wronged. He was hurt. He was wounded. Everything. Even if none of those existed, and the Prophet ﷺ, just because he was a prophet of Allah, would have made dua to Allah, Allah would have accepted it. But this only escalated the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ. So when the Prophet ﷺ reached this place called Qarn al-Tha'alib, Allah sent Angel Jibreel alayhi salam. He greeted the Prophet ﷺ saying, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. And then he said, O Prophet of Allah, Allah has sent the angel of mountains who is at your service. He is given the orders by Allah to fulfill your wish in regard to these people who have humiliated you and who have abandoned you and who have hurt you. He's ready to fulfill your wish. If you wish to destroy these people, the angel of mountain will destroy these people. So the angel of mountains appears before the Prophet ﷺ. He greets the Prophet ﷺ, and then he says, O Prophet of Allah, Allah has given me the permission to follow your command. If you wish that these people are destroyed forever, I can crush them with these mountains. I can literally bring the mountains up and drop it on them, and they will be gone forever. There will be no sign of them left. The Prophet ﷺ, despite being heartbroken, despite being oppressed, despite being humiliated by these people, he chose to make dua for these people. And he said to the angel, no, I do not want the destruction of these people. Because if these people do not listen to me, then my hope is that from their progeny, there will be people who will accept Islam, who will follow Islam, and who will please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who will believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no, I do not want you to crush them. Subhanallah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did answer the prayers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in regard to these people. Same people, only 13 years later, or less than that, they all embraced Islam. They all entered into the fold of Islam. Banu Thaqif and others from Taif, they all embraced Islam as well. If those people were killed at that time by the punishment of Allah, there will be no Islam in them afterwards. And there will be no Islam in their progeny, because if they are gone, then there's no progeny. This is how merciful our beloved Prophet ﷺ was. This is how kind our beloved Prophet ﷺ was. This is the best example of his best character. That despite being on the receiving end of humiliation, pain, and suffering from his own people, he chose to pray for them. And he chose to ask Allah to guide them instead. Instead of destroying them, he said, oh Allah, guide them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered the prayers of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. We'll make dua inshallah for the beloved father of brother Asif and Tariq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala admit him in Jannatul Firdaus. And we'll make dua inshallah for the Quran that has been completed as well. Recitation number 33 and 34 inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. اللهم صل وسلم على عبدك ورسولك. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد افضل صلواتك. اللهم انا نسالك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم انا نسالك العفو والعافيه والمعافاه الدائمه في الدين والدنيا والاخره. اللهم ارحمنا بالقران العظيم واجعله لنا اماما ونورا وهدى ورحمه. اللهم ذكرنا منه ما نسينا وعلمنا منه ما جهلنا وارزقنا تلاوته اناء الليل واناء النهار واجعله لنا حجه يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات المسلمين والمسلمات الاحياء منهم والاموات انك سميع قريب مجيب الدعاء. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
It's